I was 23 the day my mother's palm cracked across my face and sent one of my pearl studs skittering across the hotel ballroom like a runaway moon. It was my sister's wedding. A Saturday gilded to the point of satire hydrangeas, heaped into clouds, a quartet sawing a romantic climate into the air. Waiters moving in silver currents through a sea of cousins and clients and uninvited acquaintances, who'd elbowed their way into the guest list with smiles sharp as fish hooks. I wore a champagne dress that wasn't my color and shoes I couldn't afford. Because this was Lila's day. And Lila had always believed that appearances were a kind of prayer, say it beautifully enough, and God would forgive the rest. Before it happened, I was happy in the brittle way a person holding glass can be happy. Lila looked radiant, laughing with her new husband beneath a chandelier like a galaxy rested in crystal. Dad kept lifting his glass and telling the story of how he once played pickup basketball with a point guard who almost went pro. Mom floated from table to table and her mother of the bride dressed of silk, flattering and sharp, like the blade of a pretty knife accepting compliments as if they were debts finally repaid. And then the band took a break. The applause died like rain dissolving in heat. And I saw Mom and Dad striding toward me as if some private alarm had sounded. Their smiles were too bright, their steps were too purposeful. If I'd had sense, I would have run. Evelyn, Mom said, "We need your keys." Keys, the word fell out of me, clumsy. And I tried to smile because people were watching. People always watched us. The Martinez family are perfect pictures, are carefully curated dramas. To what? To your penthouse, Dad said, quiet and firm in the way he used when he wanted to seem reasonable to strangers. Now, the room tilted. I wish I could say I laughed, or that I made a joke, or that I was too shocked to speak. But the truth is I felt my mouth go dry and my hands begin to shake. Because I knew this was not a misunderstanding. They had talked about this. They had chosen a moment with an audience and a chandelier and a bride who couldn't be allowed to cry. Mom's smile flashed and vanished. You don't need it, sweetheart. You hardly live there anyway. It makes sense for Lila and Grant to start their life somewhere nice, somewhere nice. The penthouse was 2 minutes from the clinic where I worked nights and studied days and slept on the couch when I didn't have the energy to climb into bed. It smelled like lemons because I cleaned it myself on Sundays. And there was a crooked little balcony where the sunset poured itself across the city. Like a melted coin, I'd signed the lease with my own job offer letter. I dragged the mattress up 6 flights with the help of a neighbor who never wore shoes. I'd made a home there because no one had ever given me one. "I'm not handing over my keys," I said. And it was as if I'd smashed a bottle on the floor. Conversations paused, faces tilted toward us like flowers turning toward light. Mom's eyes went bright and hard. "Don't be dramatic. This is family, this is my home." Dad touched my elbow as if a gentler grip could lead me down the aisle of their logic. "Be gracious, Evelyn, you can move in with us for a while. Layla and Grant need a place ready now. They have a place." My voice was too loud. I could hear it lifting above the soft clink of glass. "They have each other. They don't need my home." The slap came from another era, hers maybe. Or her mother's, delivered without thinking, a reflex older than apology. It turned my head and rang the chandelier. The stud tore free and bounced, bright as a star, once, twice, 3 times across polished wood. I stared at it on the floor, stupid with the kind of pain that was mostly astonishment. I heard one of the violinist say oh, and a waiter suck in his breath like he'd almost dropped a tray. "Now," Mom whispered, so softly that only I could hear the ache behind the anger. "Before you ruin this day." I bent and picked up the earring. My fingers were steady. When I stood, I placed it in my palm like a tiny tooth and closed my fist around it. My cheek burned. I imagined a handprint blooming there, a flower of shame. "No," I said, and the word was small, but it felt like the only stone I owned. "No." I didn't wait for their answer. I turned and walked, my heels biting the floor, past the cluster of sorority girls who had once ignored me at my own university, past Aunt Lucia, who loved gossip more than any sacrament, past Leela herself, who was cutting the cake with Grant and didn't look up because this wasn't supposed to be about me. Not today, not ever. The hallway outside the ballroom smelled like lilies and floor polish. I kept walking until the music faded to a hum, laughter dim as a dream. And then I stopped under a painting of an invented pastoral landscape and pulled out my phone. The screen showed my cheek, pink and tender, and for one foolish moment I Wondered what my face would look like in 20 years with this memory pressed beneath the skin. Like a fossil. I scrolled to a number I hadn't used in months, not since I'd decided I would do things the clean way, the honest way, the way that made Mom sigh with a relief to rehearse to be real. The number was labeled with nothing. Not a name, not a hope. Only a blank, because leaving it blank was the same as leaving it behind. I called. He picked up on the second ring. Evelyn, his voice was a door opening in the dark. I let it open. I need a favor, I said. Always, he answered, and I could hear engines, voices, a life moving along some other street. Where? I told him. And what, exactly, am I walking into? A wedding, I said, and a laugh cracked out of me. Quick and tired, a very beautiful trap. Who am I to be? Someone my mother will recognize. I said, and never forgive. He was silent for a heartbeat. 1 hour, the call ended like a candle pinched. And I stood in the hallway counting the breaths it took for the pain in my cheek to settle into something colder. The earring in my fist pressed a little crescent into my palm. I put it in my clutch and walked to the ladies' room, where the mirror told me the truth. There would be a mark. The left side of my face was flushing toward red, the color of a story that belonged to someone else. An angry mother, a suited father, an obedient daughter who handed over keys and smiled on command. I washed my hands in cool water until my skin learned calm again, then went back to the ballroom. If the slap had been a stone thrown into a pond, the water had already closed. People were dancing. Layla and Grant were making rounds with their photographer, perfect in every frame. Dad was at the bar with 2 of his colleagues, his hand moving in easy arcs, joking about mergers like marriages, and Mom looked at me once. A look that held so many small knives I couldn't count them, and then turned back to a cluster of her friends. I walked to my table and sat. A cousin I barely knew leaned in and murmured, "You okay?" The way you ask a stranger if they dropped their scarf. I smiled the way you smile at firemen and nodded. When the band struck up a Motown favorite everyone knew, I stood and clapped. And when Leela glanced over my shoulder as if checking the horizon for weather, I lifted my glass in a toast that meant nothing and everything. What happened? Whispered Rosa, my only friend who'd come. The only one who would notice the way my throat kept working around words I didn't want to swallow. Later. You don't have to stay. I do. The certainty surprised me. I wanted to stay. I wanted to see the shape of the trouble I'd called into being, for once. I wanted to watch the collapse instead of sweeping it up. Time is slow when you're waiting for something you've summoned. I danced once with a lanky groomsman who smelled like mint and self-regard. I took a picture of Leela tossing her bouquet. Even though I'd never wanted flowers thrown at me like a prophecy, I ate a forkful of cake that tasted like sugar apologizing for itself. In the center of it all, I kept touching my cheek to feel the heated map of it. A geography I hadn't chosen but would not forget. At exactly an hour, the kind of exactness that makes your life feel rigged. A man walked into the reception and cut the room like a ship's prow. He wasn't tall or broad. He wore a dark suit that didn't try too hard. But he moved with the economy of someone accustomed to doors parting and promises kept. He was not handsome in any easy way. Handsomeness would have been a costume, and he had come as something else. Consequence. I saw Mom's back stiffen before she turned. When she did, when she saw his face, the scream cracked out of her like a secret finally shoved into daylight. Conversation stopped the way a heart stops. Glass paused midair. Someone laughed in confusion and then didn't say Evelyn Martinez, he said, with a small bow that was both respectful and unforgiving. It's been a long time. Her mouth worked. You how? I stood. My legs remembered the first time I'd met him, the night outside a garage that used to be a bakery. The air smelling like wet flour and gasoline, his eyes a color the dark had to make room for. Back then he'd been a man with information for sale and principles for rent. Now he was something else entirely, because I hadn't asked him to bring me anything. I'd asked him to be himself in a room where my family believed they could write the ending before the middle had begun. He turned to me and inclined his head, one side of his mouth lifting. The greeting was small enough to be polite and large enough to be a promise. He didn't look at my cheek. He didn't have to. The room had already seen. Dad stepped forward. Palms up. I'm sorry. This is a private event. The man's gaze slid to him in a way, as if he were studying a painting he'd already appraised. I know. He said, I brought a gift. Who are you? Grant asked, voice white with the particular outrage of men who believe their weddings are invincible. An old friend, the man said, and then because malice is a garnish he rarely used of the truth, he reached into his jacket. Several cousins flinched instinctively as if a movie had taught them what men pull from dark wool. But what he drew out was an envelope, thick as a good book, sealed in red wax like a melodrama. He held it lightly as if it weighed nothing at all. For the bride, he said. And for the mother of the bride. Leila's face, perfect until that moment, changed the way clouds change when wind remembers them. She looked at me. And the look was a question. And I could have answered it with a nod or a shake or the simple refusal of motion. But I didn't move. I had spent too many years being the hinge everyone turned. I wanted to be something else. I wanted to be the door that stayed still while the house spun. Mom took the envelope. Her fingers trembled. She tore the seal, pride making her rough, and slid out the documents inside. She read the first page and her lips tightened. She read the second and her color drained to a shade I'd only seen once before. When the doctor told her that Dad's heart had floated too long in sorrow and salt and might decide someday soon to stop swimming. What is this? Dad said. Taking the papers, his eyes moved, his face ranged itself into disbelief, then anger, then calculation. It was like watching weather cross a map. Grant reached for the stack. Leila held his wrist. Her knuckles went white. Congratulations, the man said softly. You just became interesting. Someone at the bar whispered that they should call security. Someone else said to call the police. The violinists stood with their instruments like chins held high. Mom lifted her head. When she spoke, her voice had the brittle brightness of a wine glass you know will break if you set it down too hard. This is slander, it's evidence, the man replied. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to, of your attempt to transfer a lease that doesn't belong to you, leverage credit that isn't yours, and consolidate assets in ways that would look very unfortunate to auditors. Do you want me to go on, Segura Martinez? I can. I brought copies. The room inhaled like a single creature. Dad's mouth opened and closed. Leila stared at the papers as if they might vanish. If she concentrated, Grant's jaw worked, muscle ticking like a metronome. Mom found me in the crowd then, our eyes caught and held. What lived in hers was not simple anger anymore. It was confusion braided with relief. Terror knotted with recognition. She looked like a woman who'd wandered into a mirror and found the wrong reflection waiting. You did this, she said. Yes, I said. Why? Because I was tired of being furniture. Because love that takes your house is a love that will also take the skin off your face and tell you you're prettier without it. Because I wanted them to stop before they ruined more than a party. Because once, when I was 9, I found Mom crying into a dish towel and told her I would grow up to be a ceiling over our heads. And she laughed and said ceilings don't pay rent, baby. Because I had keys, I didn't say any of that. I only let the man's presence do the speaking, the way a thunderhead speaks just by existing. Shall we talk somewhere private? He asked, finally, his voice gentle like sand. Or shall we continue the lesson here? Dad folded the papers and set them carefully on the nearest table. As if they were explosives, he understood. Private, good, the man said. He glanced at me again, a question this time. I'm staying, I told him. It's Lila's wedding. He nodded, accepting the boundary as if I'd drawn it on a map he respected. He guided my parents toward a side door with the simple authority of a man escorting guests to a less bright room. Security moved uncertainly in the edges of the ballroom, unsure who needed protecting from whom. Leila came to me up close. She smelled like gardenias and the kind of perfume women wear when they want to seem more expensive than they feel. What is happening, Evie? I didn't want it to, but that wasn't true. I had wanted something to break because the intact story was breaking me. You called him, yes. Who is he? A man who knows where the bones are buried. I almost smiled. And who put some of them in the ground? Her laugh was a small, broken thing. You're not funny, I know. She looked at my cheek. Her hand rose as if to touch it, then fell. Does it hurt? Yes, I said. And the honesty surprised us both. But it's clean somehow, like something finally cut instead of gnawed. We stood in the middle of our curated evening and watched the door that had swallowed our parents. The band started another song because what else could they do? Pants put their arms around uncles. The cake sat in thick, sweet indifference. My earring pressed in my clutch, a tiny circle of something that once anchored me. Grant hovered, trying to look like a man who could fix things with a firm handshake. Should we stop the party? Leila didn't take her eyes off the door. No, we keep dancing. So we did. Or rather, they did, the guests, the cousins, the co-workers. The neighbors who'd come for free drinks and a story to tell. I stood on the edge watching. And in the watching I felt something loosen in me, the idea that I owed anyone a version of myself. That didn't cost them anything. I had paid. I had paid with rooms and quiet and the unslept hours of my body. I was done paying when the door opened again. There was a new temperature in the room, the kind you get after a storm when the air has been rinsed. And everything smells like metal and honesty. Dad's face was a lesson in humility done badly. Mom's was a cathedral with all the stained glass removed. The man walked behind them, unhurried, his hands empty. He came to me and spoke so that only Leela and I could hear. "It's done for tonight," he said. "Tomorrow there will be calls, but the penthouse is safe. The accounts are sealed against transfer. If they try to pressure you again, you call me." "What did you take from them?" Layla asked. Hollow-voiced, "Only the notion that what belongs to your sister belongs to everyone," he said. "A small theft to correct a larger one." Mom looked toward me, and in her eyes I saw something I had not expected to see so soon. Not love, not apology, a vacancy where certainty had lived. It made her look younger and somehow kinder. She didn't speak. She didn't have to. The night had decided to end differently than she'd written it. Tomorrow would come with its ledger and its lawyers and its remorse. Tonight, the band was playing a song about staying. Tonight, my cheek throbbed with an honest ache. Tonight, my sister put her hand in mine and squeezed once. As if we were on a bridge together and had just decided not to jump. I exhaled. Somewhere far above, a chandelier remembered how to shine without shaking. The city would wait. My keys were in my clutch, heavy and real. I touched them the way you touch a promise and felt, finally, like I had given myself one. The party ended the way fires do, slowly, with a long sigh and an afterglow that made you wonder if anything had burned at all. Layla and Grant left to a corridor of sparklers, the light touching their faces in a fever of glitter. My parents slipped out through a service exit with the man who said he needed signatures on something that would keep certain hands where they belonged. And the cousins returned to their children, their gossip, their careful lives. I collected my clutch, my phone, my dignity like 3 fragile keepsakes, and walked into the midnight that smelled of rain. That hadn't happened. Outside, the hotel's facade rose like a well-behaved cliff. Taxis hummed, a bus sighed. I pressed the cold of the night to my face until the leftover heat in my cheek gave up and let me have the skin back. My heel caught on a crack in the sidewalk and I laughed, unlovely and honest, because it would have been perfectly ridiculous to eat pavement after everything else. "Need a ride?" The voice came from my left, shaped by the kind of amusement that never had to prove itself. He leaned on a car that did not announce its price, which meant it was expensive. His jacket hung open now, the tie in his pocket, sleeves rolled to elbows the way men do when they want you to know they can clean blood or wash dishes with equal competence. "I can get myself home," I said. "You always could," he said. "Still offer stands." I looked down the street as if the city could choose for me. It didn't. Cities rarely do. I walked to his car and opened the passenger door before he could, because I was not in the mood to be taken care of by gestures, only by speed. "Seatbelt," he said. "Moshes," I said, just to put weight on the name. "If you tell me to buckle up like I'm your kid, I'll walk." He grinned. And in the grin there was the ghost of who he'd been when I met him. A man who could make a room disappear around a story. "Then don't make me worry." "I never make you anything." But I buckled the belt and leaned my head back as the city slid from the curb. He drove like a person who understood consequence. No hurry, no wandering. Just the road and the math of it. Silence can be a wall or a bridge. With Moshes it was a bridge. We crossed it without talking until the hotel shrank to a bright memory, and the wet black of the river came into view, stitched with the lights of barges carrying other people's futures. Wind pushed at the car. I tried the window and felt the night like the hand of an old friend. "You doing okay?" he asked, very quietly. "No," I said. "Better." He nodded as if that made perfect sense. Maybe it did. On his arm was a pale line that ran from wrist to mid-forearm. A little river of scar tissue I'd traced with a fingertip once while we were both too tired to lie. He caught me looking at it and rolled his sleeve lower. "Mom used to say I got my stubbornness from her," I said. "Tonight I felt like I stole it." "She didn't hit you because you're stubborn," he said. "She hit you because you refused to play your position. People who write the script don't forgive ad-libbing, and you brought them." "What, exactly?" Evidence, he said, not all of it, enough. I pictured the envelope, the wax like a theatrical wink. What happens now? Tomorrow your parents will try to decide whether they're scared enough to stop, or proud enough to make me show the rest. He slid us into the turn lane with the kind of patience that makes other drivers fall in love with you or hate you. If they choose proud, we play a different song. Is there a version of this where nobody gets destroyed? There's a version where the right people stop pretending the river is a sidewalk, he said. Destruction is a word for those who believe they were permanent. He parked in front of my building even though I hadn't told him the address. He'd been here before. Once, delivering a manila folder that had kept a predatory landlord from pretending the law was a rumor. I stared up at the rusted balcony where I kept my plants like promises. The window above the tree-lined street housed a soft square of darkness, my living room. My couch, the lamp with a crooked shade that I couldn't convince myself to throw away because crooked things had decided I was theirs. You want me to walk you up? He asked. No, I said, but come up anyway. He laughed, not unkindly. Your rules are a maze. My rules are a map, I said, and stepped out into the night. The stairwell held the day's heat like a reluctant memory. My heels knocked out a rhythm I'd learned in childhood. Keep going, keep going, keep going on the third floor. Mrs. Alvarez opened her door to throw out the trash and saw my face. Her eyes, soft and practical, went sharp. Your mama, she asked. Her hand, I said. She shook her head. The saints don't like it when women do the work of storms, then. Because she never let a lecture travel without a gift, she pressed a cold can of soda into my palm. For the swelling, thank you, I said, and meant it. On the 5th floor landing, Moshes caught up. He carried the quiet like luggage. We reached my door. The lock turning with a small precision that still startled me. The click that said I belonged inside. The lemon smell welcomed like a ritual. I kicked off my shoes, the left one delivering a merciful sigh, and set my clutch on the counter. When I flipped the switch, the room emitted a warm, ordinary light. Nothing in it demanded a toast. Sometimes survival looks like beige. Want tea? I asked. If you're having some. I put the kettle on because it didn't require courage. Moshes went to the sliding door and stepped onto the balcony like he was entering a chapel that didn't mind cigarettes he wasn't about to smoke. The skyline breathed far below. A couple drifted past on the sidewalk in the loose choreography of people who still believed the world would continue to be kind if asked nicely. You ever going to tell me why you keep helping me? I asked from the doorway, the kettle still quiet. I like correcting errors, he said. And you're surrounded by people who miscalculate. He turned, his face lit by the city's dull jewelry. Also, I owe you. For what? For the day you showed up at the warehouse alone and told me you don't scare easy. His smile was a small storm. It reminded me I could pick clients instead of owners. The kettle began its soft complaint. I poured water over tea bags and watched the color bloom. The way stories bloom when you admit you want to hear them. I carried his mug out and leaned on the railing beside him. The wind lifted my hair and sent it back obediently. You know what my mother once told me, I said. She said daughters are the vault doors of a family, heavy, necessary. Beautiful if you have a taste for that sort of thing, and locked, he said, and locked, I agreed. Tonight I heard something inside me laughing, like someone had figured out the code. He tilted his head toward my cheek, not touching it. You want a doctor to look at that? I am a doctor, I said, almost. A doctor of sleep deprivation with a minor in guilt. I smiled despite myself. Moshes, HMM. If they don't stop, you'll help me. What do you think I'm for? Fire escapes clanged somewhere to our right, a cat moving like a rumor. The tea was hot and stern. I could already feel the brew settling in under the skin. A tide committing to its schedule. I have to be at the clinic at 7, I said. I should wash this night off, then I'll go, he said. He set the mug on the little table where I kept a plant that had outgrown its pot, but was too polite to complain. He moved toward the door. I caught his sleeve. Thank you, I said. He looked at my hand, then at me. Don't thank me yet, he said softly. Thank me when the calls are over and the river decides to be a river again. After he left, the apartment sighed differently. I locked the door, checked it twice the way I always did when I needed to feel like boundaries were real, and stripped out of the champagne dress. It puddled like a defeated sunset. In the shower, water hit my cheek and turned the burn into a dull, animal thing. I stayed there too long. When I got out, my phone was lit on the counter with 3 missed calls from an unknown number. And one voicemail from my father, Evelyn, his voice said, "Too careful, we'll talk tomorrow. Please don't do anything rash. Your mother is, we love you, we'll talk." The pause inside "we love you" was a field where nothing grew. At 1:17 a.m., Leela texted, "I'm sorry, can I come over?" I told her yes and unlocked the door. She arrived 9 minutes later in sneakers and a dress that had decided to stop being formal. Her hair pinned back with bobby pins that gave up one by one. She stood in the doorway as if requesting permission to breathe. "Come in," I said. She did, closing the door behind her the way you shut weather out. She looked around at the living room that had saved me from the worst of my loneliness and smiled a little, the way people smile at a room that has done its job. Then her eyes found my cheek and went wet. "I didn't know," she said. "I would have." "No," I said. "You were busy getting married." "That's not it." "Is," I said. "You were busy getting married. It's allowed." We sat on the couch with our knees making a small bridge between us. For a moment we only listened, pipes muttering, heat clicking, the building's breath. She took my hand, thumb tracing the scar I had from a bread knife that had slipped the winter I learned to bake out of sheer solitude. "What did he show them?" she asked, voice low. "Enough," I said. "Transfers, plans. Numbers that pretend to be innocent until they realize you're watching." She looked at our joined hands. "Why would they?" "Because they thought they could," I said. "And because they were trying to anchor you in a life that started to fast. With a man who, I don't know him yet. I hope he's kind." "He is," she said, too quickly, then softer. "He is, I think." I let the quiet widen. The city pressed its ear to our window. Lila's face, rinsed of makeup, looked younger than the 15 months between us. "Do you remember when we were kids?" she said. "And Mom used to make us hold the measuring tape while she sewed. We had to stand there forever, pretending our arms weren't burning. I remember," she would say, "if you can't hold still, you can't have pretty things." Lila laughed. And it was an ugly little laugh that made me love her more. Tonight I realized I don't want pretty things that way. I squeezed her fingers. "Then don't. Is it that easy?" "No," I said. "It's harder. It's a whole different kind of work. You'll disappoint them. They'll call that ingratitude. You'll call it oxygen." She leaned her head on my shoulder the way she had when we were little and thunderstorms sent us skittering down the hall to the same bed. My t-shirt soaked a small patch of her tears. We sat like that until 2:03. When she straightened and said, "I should go, he's waiting. Tell him you needed to see your sister, he'll understand," she said, and touched my cheek with the back of her fingers like a benediction she wasn't sure she had the right to give. At the door, she turned. "Evie, what if they turn this into a war? I'm on your side." "No," I said, and the word was gentle for once. "We're not making sides. We're making a shape where nobody has to pick between oxygen and family." She nodded, not convinced, but grateful for the fiction. She left. The hall clicked back into silence. I set to pillows on the couch even though I would sleep in my bed. An old habit from years when I expected someone to show up needing a place to land and didn't want to move in the dark. Sleep came like a bargain I had won by accident. Morning barged through the curtains while I was still arguing with dreams that wanted me back. And I woke with my cheeks stiff and the taste of metal in my mouth. The body's way of filing rage under vitamins. The city sounded different at 6, trucks throating low, the garbage men gossiping like roosters. The urgent hush of nurses changing shifts. I dressed in scrubs that had given up trying to be cute and tied my hair in a knot that held. Because I'd learned where to put the pins. In the kitchen, I ate 2 pieces of toast standing up. Then put the third into a napkin because my day would forget to feed me if I didn't lay out breadcrumbs. On the sidewalk, my phone trembled with the first real call. Unknown again. Then Mom. I watched her name buzz across the glass like a bee that had lost its hive. I let it go to voicemail and told myself that was kindness. I was giving her time to choose words that weren't weapons. At the clinic, the lobby clock had the same stutter it always had. I took vitals. I changed a dressing on a man whose blood sugar kept choosing adventure. I talked a teenager through the math of her panic until the numbers got bored and wandered off. Every time I washed my hands, the mirror returned that rose-dark stamp on my cheek. Fading now from furious to thoughtful. Colleagues asked if I'd walked into a door. I told them yes because the truth would take too long to bandage. At 9:11, the administrator called me into her office and shut the door with the care of a person who had been told too many secrets by mistake. "There are visitors here to see you," she said. "They said they're family." Send them to the supply closet, I said. We can meet among the gauze. She stared at me, then laughed despite herself. Break room, 5 minutes. I went to the sink and splashed my face with cold water I didn't need. Then I walked to the break room with my shoulders leveled the way you level a table. Under a wobbly bowl, my father was standing by the vending machine, staring at a honey bun like it had the power to absolve him. My mother sat at the table, hands around a paper cup that said this could be coffee in a font too cheerful for the morning. We were about to have, Evelyn, she said. Mom, Dad, we're not here to fight, Dad began. Good, I said. I already have a job. Mom watched me with a look I'd never seen before, a searching that had nothing to do with leverage. We wanted to talk calmly, she said, as if the word itself could summon the mood. About last night, about chess. You mean about the fact that you tried to take my home and then my face? When I said no, I said that her flinch was small and human. It made me want to forgive her and keep my doors locked at the same time. I lost my temper. You lost the script, I said. Your temper followed. Dad reached for the chair and sat carefully, his tie already loosened, the choreography of surrender. We were scared, he said, for Leela, for her future. We acted like owners in a panic. Of me, I said. Of the narrative, he corrected, surprising us both. We wrote a story where family resources moved like blood to where the wound was. We didn't ask if you were bleeding too. The vending machine hummed as if it understood. Mom's eyes went shiny and then shut, as if tears would get her indicted. We talked to the man. She said, Moshes. I said, Moshes. She repeated, as if trying on the syllables to see if they fit her mouth. He didn't threaten. He just put the ledgers down and looked at us, and we saw us, and we're not proud, she said, the admission walking barefoot across gravel. We won't try to transfer anything. We won't touch your lease, your accounts, your life. I will apologize for she gestured vaguely toward my face. I will apologize. You just did, I said. No, she said, and stood, the chair's legs complaining. She came around the table and stopped a respectful distance from me, where a mother would stop if she were asking a daughter for directions. I am sorry, she said. The words were plain, no garnish. I am ashamed. The part of me that had prepared for war had not packed for this weather. I swallowed. The break room smelled like burnt coffee and the ghosts of lunches outside the window. A bus scrolled advertisements for a law firm that promised to be mean on your behalf. We'll go to counseling, Dad said quietly. All of us, if that's what you want, or just your mother and I, or just your mother or me. Whatever combination gets us to a place where we don't use love like a pry bar. I can't fix you, I said, and didn't mean it cruelly. We're not asking you to, Mom said. Her hands had gone still around the cup. We're asking if we can stop breaking you. Somewhere down the hall, a child laughed the way only children not presently in pain laugh. I looked at my parents, the woman whose slap still lived on my skin, the man whose silence had been the architecture of most of our mistakes, and felt something shift, a plate sliding under a continent. Not forgiveness, geology. I'll send you a list of therapists, I said. You make the appointments. You go. We will, Dad said. And you apologize to Leela, too, I said, for trying to make her first good day a transaction. We did this morning, he said. She cried. Then she told us to get out of her kitchen. He smiled, a little proud through his remorse. She sounded like you. We stood there in the shabby break room, breathing the same air and not hating it. Mom looked at my cheek again and lifted a hand, stopping before the touch. May I? I thought of Mrs. Alvarez and the saints, of Moshes, and his evidence, of Leela and her sneakers crying into my t-shirt. Then I nodded. Her fingers were cool. She brushed the bruise like a person sweeping ashes into a respectful pile. I have always loved you hard, she said. I would like to learn soft, okay? I said, and felt the word leave me with less resistance than I'd expected. Learn. They left quietly, the way people leave churches when the sermon has unnerved them. I stood at the window and watched them cross the parking lot side by side. The space between them measurable, bridgeable. I could not see the river from the clinic, but I felt it somewhere out there insisting on its shape. Back at the sink, I washed my hands and saw in the mirror how the bruise had decided to be a steady and yellow tomorrow. I touched the skin and it did not flinch. In my pocket, my keys rode light and loud, a small chorus of metal. I set them on the counter and they made their little noise. The sound of a life that opened and closed when I asked it to. Before my next patient, I texted Masha's. They chose scared. Thank you. His reply came instantly. Like he'd been waiting with a phone in his palm and the day on pause, a thumbs up emoji. Then, the river appreciates your cooperation. I laughed at the sink. Then I turned and walked back into my shift, holding the door for a woman whose arms were full of a toddler who had outgrown her fear and decided to scream at the world for fun. The mother looked at me with gratitude you can't fake. I looked back with a softness I wanted to keep. At noon, a bouquet arrived at the front desk, peonies and something wild I couldn't name. The card said simply, "I'm learning, Mama." I took the flowers home that night and put them where the crooked lamp threw its sincere light. They made the room smell like new decisions. Days slid, as days do when you stop trying to outrun them. My cheek faded from a story into a lesson. Layla sent photos from a small honeymoon that looked like a long date with fewer witnesses. Daddy mailed me to therapists' names and the receipts for the appointments like a kid holding up a report card. Mom texted me pictures of soup she was making, as if food could re-stitch cloth. Maybe it could. I ate with her on a Wednesday in a kitchen I hadn't sat in for months. We didn't touch the hard topics first. We let the steam rise from bowls and learned the weather. Again, one evening, I came home to find a note under my door in handwriting that had never learned to be ashamed. I knew it was Masha's before I picked it up. And I knew what it would say before I read it. Call if the river rises, and a number. The same as always, sacred as a code. I slipped the paper into the drawer where I kept warranties for appliances I didn't trust, and sat on the balcony under a sky that had the courtesy to be clear. The city went about its restless duties. On the street below, someone played a trumpet that made the air remember how to be a song. I rested my keys on the railing and watched them catch the last light. I was 23 the day my mother's hand made a mark that did not own me after. I learned how to carry both the softness and the steel without feeling like one canceled the other. People kept dancing, the river kept refusing to be anything but itself. And me, I moved through rooms like a woman with pockets full of doors, choosing which ones to unlock and when to let them stay closed. By the next week, everything had begun to settle like dust after a storm. My parents went to therapy, though Dad complained about the parking and Mom complained about the therapist's cardigan. Still they went. Leela sent me photos of her kitchen, her hand in grants, her laughter spilling through captions that told me she was trying to build her life. Without leaning on mine, I learned to breathe differently. The bruise faded, yellow first, then green, then gone. What stayed was the memory, not sharp anymore, just a scar on the inside. One I could trace with my thoughts when I needed reminding. One evening, I came home from the clinic, tossed my keys on the counter, and realized the apartment smelled like peonies again. Mom had sent more flowers. No card this time, just the gesture. It was enough. Masha's called once, checking in. The river's calm, he said. I smiled into the phone. Then let's let it run. I sat on my crooked little balcony that night, the city humming under me, and thought about what it meant to keep something that was mine. At 23, I finally understood. Keeping wasn't greed. It was survival. It was dignity. It was love turned inward, steady and unapologetic. And so I stayed there, holding my cup of tea, the keys shining under the last light of day, proof that I could choose my doors, and proof that I would never again give them away.